Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Happy Recap Radio Show. I'm JB, along with EJ on this beautiful Sunday that we're recording. And, one of those things that from the original Happy Recap that you may or may not know, we used to be live on a Sunday. So referring to Sunday is still something I have a tendency to do. But glad to have you along with us. First of all, EJ, I got to tell you, we had a tremendous response to last week's show. No show in, 2.5, almost 3 years. And people really seem to dig it, and it only suggests to me that people must be more bored than I thought during this quarantine.
Yeah. Yeah, once again, and I gave the shout outs last week, but I got to do it again to the fans of the show, to everybody who tuned in last week. I mean, the outpouring of encouragement and people who seem to really enjoy last week's show. I can't thank you enough. It means the world to me. Like JB and I said when we started this, it was just him, myself, and Ryan just kind of hanging out and doing our thing. If we were the only three who listened to it, so be it. That's I kind of approached last week too, and instead we got a pretty amazing number of people who tuned in. So thank you to you guys. One thing that's really cool, JB, and I talked to you a little bit about this through text this week, is we have a new biggest #1 fan, and it's my oldest son, Joey. He is YouTube obsessed. He has all of his YouTubers who love their roadblocks and their Minecraft and all that. For his birthday, he asked me for a bunch of merchandise from some of these YouTubers. And all of a sudden the other day, I was looking at something on his iPad related to our show. And he was like, "Wait, Dad, you have a YouTube channel?" I was like, "Yeah, it's for my podcast." "Yeah, you have a podcast?" It's like, "Yeah." Next thing you know, he's on his video chat with all of his little buddies, telling all of them, "My dad's a podcaster and he's a YouTuber, and this is so cool. Dad, can I be on your podcast sometime?" And I think I've answered every single podcast-related question over the past 3 days that I could possibly answer, and including just now as I'm coming down to the studio to record. He just opens the door real quick. "Good luck, Dad." "Thanks, buddy. I can't wait to hear the final product." And, "Dad, you guys edit. Dad, you guys have music. Dad, you guys have effects." And that's so cool to me, because when you think about it, when we started the radio show originally, he wasn't even born yet. He's 9 now. So, and when we hung it up, he wasn't really into sports as much, and he certainly wasn't into YouTube. So to have him as our coolest, biggest #1 fan really touches me. And I do have to give him props, because the laptop on which I'm recording this on is indeed the one that we bought him so he could have schoolwork done during the pandemic. So what's up, Joey? Thanks again, buddy. Thanks for letting me use the laptop, and I'm glad you liked the podcast. And JB, he's dying to say hi to you one night before we start recording.
Absolutely. I look forward to it. My favorite Joey memory is when Joey, before he made his initial appearance about, a couple months beforehand, you called me up one Sunday morning before the live show and say, "We just found out we're pregnant." And
Right.
we're not telling anybody. And we got into the show, and I could tell you were still a little on edge.
Right.
It was you, me, and Ryan that week. And I think Ryan knew. And we get to the point, and I finally just said, "Guys, just, EJ's just really excited right now because he found out the biggest news today of his life."
Right.
The Mets had actually earlier that day in a deadline deal traded away their, to that point, catcher Rod Barajas, which tells you how long ago this is. So I just blurted out, he is so excited about the Rod Barajas trade, and I could tell that you were shooting darts at me through the what was then the phone, basically. But I had just zinged you, and you calmed down for the rest of the show after that.
Right. Yeah.
And I love that, because you totally thought I was about to blow it on live radio.
Right. That was a hilarious prank you got me on. I know Joey will respect that, because he does love a good prank. And it was true. You guys were the only ones I told, aside from my parents. Otherwise, we kept the entire superstitious 3 months till we tell anyone. But I told you guys basically when my mom and dad, and then you guys the next day, and then no one else for 3 months. So that was pretty cool to get to share with you guys.
That was an honor. And so, yeah, anytime Joe wants to hang, he's welcome.
Trust me, if you open up that invitation, he's going to take you up on it one of these weeks.
It is open. It is absolutely open. And speaking of open invitations, Ryan, you've got one too. So just so you know. So this week has not been uneventful in the world of Mets baseball, and certainly, I think if all we had going on right now, EJ, it was the fact that summer camp, whatever you want, training camp, whatever you want to call it right now, is occurring, and the fact that we actually had the ability earlier this week on YouTube to actually watch some sim game action, which was pretty epic. The reality of it is, off the field, we're having almost as much development as on it, and it's certainly significant as we move towards what seems to be an inevitable sale of the ball club.
Yeah, it seems like Cohen came in pretty hard this week and pretty aggressive. All the bids were delivered, and I guess the real news of it was it sounds like Cohen was significantly higher than the what's being referred to as the J-Rod group, and it sounds like the Wilpons were kind of doing everything in their power to get the J-Rod group to up their bid, because it sounds like there's some real animosity between Cohen and the Wilpons based on the deal that had originally fallen through. As one person said to me on Twitter, it's like the Wilpons can't go back to him and say, "Hey, you have to pay a bleep hole tax." It is what it is. The numbers are what they are, and I really don't see the Wilpons taking what's been reported as $1 billion less just because they didn't like the guy.
Yeah, and there's certainly been some reports that the differences that occurred after that have been patched up. There have been some reports that they haven't. So there's definitely a conflict on that. And later in the program, we're going to have a guest with us. Our first guest on the new show, Justin Toscano from NorthJersey.com, Mets beat reporter, will be joining us. And certainly this will be one of the topics that we bring up with him. But the reality of it is when it comes to the amount of money, I mean, I think we've learned over the years about the Wilpons that they may try to exert an FU tax from Cohen if they're not liking him. But at the end of the day, if it's $1 more than anybody else, they are going to take the extra dollar. Nonetheless, which is the Major League Baseball owners who do not want their teams devalued by by them taking a couple $100 million less just to screw Steve Cohen.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just a Mets issue. It is that for any team that could potentially be sold, and let's be honest, there's a few out there right now. Their entire interest is seeing the Mets get sold for the highest possible dollar. And I do think no matter what the J-Rod group does scratch together, I don't think it's going to be even comparable to what Cohen's going to offer. And if it does get there, I'm not sure that Cohen wouldn't be willing to say, all right, you know what? There's another $500 million at it. Now what?
Well, and that's the other side of it, because what comes up is basically a $2 billion bid on the Mets, if if the press is to believe, if what has leaked out is accurate, and along with hey, if you decide to throw in SNY, there's another $2 billion in it for you guys, which is from what I can tell an above market valuation on SNY, which obviously he's looking for future earnings, and it's a long term investment on SNY, but that tells you to say that he at least has another $2 billion sitting around in his budget for this particular transaction. So the money is there, and that should scare the other people. And it comes down to the other part of, these other offers. Is this just them eking in with what they possibly have? Now, odds are it is, an opening salvo, and that, certainly several of them likely have more money. But question is, with the amount of financing involved and the amount of other partners, without bringing in another partner, whatever 1-7, 1-7 to 1-9, whatever the offer was that came in from the J-Rod group, they may need to bring another partner in to keep going in this if they have to put in a round 2 bid.
Yeah, I would think so. If that group wants to seriously stick around in the negotiations, I think that's inevitable that they will have to go ahead and grab another finance partner to help them get close to what Cohen has. But it's like you said. I mean, he already said, "Hey, here's $2 billion for SNY as well." So he's clearly got that budgeted for this transaction. What was funny was I actually I tweeted out after I heard the details. I said $2 billion for beer money seems a little bit steep, which I immediately was getting killed on. I'm like, "Hey, no, this is how much SNY is worth." But our good buddy Joe DeMeo at PSL to Flushing, he actually broke it down for me on the value of SNY, and he broke down how much he feels each one is worth, and it came out to about 1.6 billion. So you're seeing a guy who's sitting there like, you know what? If in order to make it happen, I'm okay throwing another $400 million at something. Okay, I think that Cohen's really aggressive right now, and he's willing to throw money at this as any way possible because he wants this done now.
Well, and that's the other thing. I mean, you don't know what his long-term plan is for S&Y, but the reality of it is a couple of years ago, and you and I talked about this on Twitter, it had about a valuation of 1.3, and it's up to about 1.6 now. But depending on what you want to do with it, it's really easy. Run right, run well, run tight as a tight ship, which is, let's be honest, has never been S&Y. Apart from Mets baseball, the reality of it is you could have a station that would increase in value. I mean, that's part of the value of it is the positioning that you have on different cable systems. So the more you put into that, you could double that money on SNY in 5 years, I think, done right.
Agreed. And if you also take into the fact that Cohen owns the Devils, and the Devils are currently airing on a network where, let's face it, they're the third hockey team on that network behind the Rangers and the Islanders. So if he could move the Devils over to SNY, they become extremely more lucrative. And I think he could also increase the popularity of his own other team because the Devils are the kid brothers on that network right now. They barely ever get any original programming dedicated to them. So he could really make a significant splash with them. And I think he could also make it much more than a regional. I think he could get the type of exposure that pretty much gets. I think he could get that for SNY.
Yeah, I think so too, and that's kind of the key. And I think that kind of shows that he is a long-term visionary with this process, and just kind of why I think a lot of fans have really gravitating towards Steve Cohen and being the not just the potential leader in the race, as it were, also the fan favorite.
He is. I definitely seen a lot of people who were on the fence. People like myself, who was a big J-Rod kind of guy. I think when we saw the actual numbers start coming in, it just makes sense that Cohen is the guy. He's a good owner. He is not a meddling owner. He is not afraid to throw money at a problem. I think really he has become the overwhelming fan favorite at this point.
Not only that, though, I mean, one of the things that he has used successfully throughout his business career is this is a man who is heavy into business analytics. And he was a firm believer in analytics in baseball. So he brings the money to the table, but he also brings even a heavier emphasis than current ownership on analytics, which with the management team that we have in place here, certainly with Brody and Luis and, all these different things, it makes sense for this type of owner because you're going to be adapting very quickly to the modern game where, let's be honest, yes, the game continues to change, but the Wilpons are traditionalists in the strongest sense of the word, to the detriment of the team.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They haven't adjusted to the changes that have happened in baseball and the way that we analyze baseball, the way that players are developed and analyzed. They haven't adapted to that. They haven't kind of stuck in the past. And here's a guy who's going to come in and he's going to see a management team that goes about their business the same way he does in his own business. So I believe it's a great marriage. It's one I hope that we can get to the altar sooner rather than later.
We should hopefully know in the next couple of weeks how the rounds of bidding are going. And of course, the other advantage that Steve Cohen has as a current minority owner of the team, he gets to see everybody else's bids.
Right, that is that is a nice upside to being a minority owner, is that he's seeing the bids and he's knowing how far off or how far away some of them are, or any of them are even nipping at his heels. And again, I feel like if he even feels the slightest nip at those heels, he's going to take the quick triple jump to make sure that they're far in his rearview mirror.
I think that, somebody was pointing out that he had made an unsuccessful bid a couple of years ago when the Magic Johnson group bought the Dodgers. Well,
Yep.
The Dodgers weren't his childhood team. The Dodgers aren't the team that he is passionate about. This is a born and raised New York Mets fan. Well, not quite born, but the reality of it is this is what he wants. This is the team he's always wanted. And I think he's willing to go the further mile that he was not willing to go with the Dodgers to get this team, his favorite team that he roots for.
I agree. And I think that's also the reason why A-Rod's involved, because A-Rod loves the
Absolutely.
Mets. He loves the Mets and he wants to be part ownership. I could see a scenario play out where Cohen owns the team and A-Rod has some type of minority ownership stake in it. I can see that play out. I think if it comes to you have the money to buy a franchise, and the one time possibly in your life that your childhood franchise comes up for sale, I think you do everything in your power to grab it. I think I agree. I don't know how determined he was to make the Dodgers sale happen, but I feel like on this one, he has put money aside that he knows this is going to get it done. Granted, he'd like to not spend as much of that money, but if he has to, I think he's saying YOLO, because it really is you only live once in this scenario. Whoever buys this team, I think we're going to have them owning the team for a very long time. Certainly, probably beyond Steve Cohen's or Cohen's years of earning the money that he's earned. So this is really it's his one shot. So I think he's going to do everything to make sure that he takes it.
Yeah, I think that the this is he's looking at this as a marriage till death do us part. He's not looking at a let's turn this investment into 2 times as much, 3 times as much money in 10, 15 years. This is the rest of his life. This is the rest of his story. This is how he wants to make his legacy, owning the team he loves.
Yeah, and at this point, I cannot believe him. He wants it. I'm happy for him to get it. I think if he gets it, there's a lot of cards on the table that might not have been Wilpons. We're looking right now, and we'll talk about him a lot this season, I'm sure. Yoenis Cespedes is a free agent at the end of this season. I would have said under the Wilpons ownership, and given his injury history, there's no chance he was coming back. These are all on-the-field decisions that could vastly change the face of this franchise, all because we do have money now to throw at things.
Yeah, and I think that Cespedes is an interesting case because we don't know physically what he has left. I mean, he could be a career DH at this point, and I think most of us assume that the DH following this season would be Cano. But you look at it, EJ and Cano transitioning, using that as a transition point to what's going on the field. Cano is one of 2 Mets that is yet to show up in camp, and there are no currently any baseball-related injuries. So read between the lines there as to why Robinson Cano is not in camp.
Right. Everybody speculated that it's probably coronavirus related. We're seeing it almost daily now. We find out new players who do have it. Most recently, our oldest Chapman over on the Yanks. It seems like every time we start feeling good that baseball is going to happen, we start getting suspicion that certain players may in fact be corona infected. Whatever's the case with Cano, I hope all is well. I hope he gets better soon. We certainly would like to see him on the field a little bit before the proposed opening day. Don't know if that's going to be the case. Everyone, I will say, on the Mets has been very tight-lipped about preparations due to COVID, about players potentially having COVID, about precautions that they're taking. It seems like everybody is very tight-lipped. A little bit, you hear down there, the guys seem to be very happy. Mark Stroman says he sent out a pretty significant tweet today saying that, yeah, basically it stinks that we're playing in a pandemic, but I feel the Mets are doing everything in their power to keep us safe, so that's good to hear. But with Cano, I'm not really sure when or if we'll hear anything in the near future.
You mentioned Stroman, and certainly if there's one thing that we've learned from day one, I mean, certainly not even a recent thing. I mean, he's a very vocal individual. He always what he's thinking. He wears his thoughts on his sleeve and his heart on his sleeve. And these are compliments, by the way. I love Marcus Stroman. And I tell you right now, that is one guy I want extended. That is a guy I want with this team for the long haul. That being said, if he says things are good, I believe him because I think he is the type of person that would call out crap if he saw it.
Oh, no doubt about it. It's been interesting. Stroman's always been very outspoken. I've always admired that about him. He's rapidly becoming one of my favorite players on this team, both on and off the field. And,
Yep.
I've been getting a sense this whole spring, as everything that's going on in the world around us, be it the pandemic, be it the issue of race in this country, Stroman is not back down from talking about any of these things very openly and very honestly. And quite frankly, I think it's what this country needs a lot more of. But every time he says something or he tweets something like that, I sit there and I say to myself, really leadership like. And I feel like Stroh is definitely poised to emerge as one of the big leaders on this team this season. And I'm perfectly happy with that. And again, like you, it's the reason I also would love to see him resign because I think this guy has it all. I think he has talent. I think he has leadership skills. I think he has the ability to get the young guys in that clubhouse to follow him. And I have nothing but admiration for the way he's composed himself this entire spring.
There's a lot of people passionate on Twitter. I mean, let's be honest. And it's kind of sort of run on passion, sometimes misguided passion, but passion nonetheless. And the thing about Marcus Stroman's passion is it always seems intelligent and well thought out and well placed, and you don't get a lot of ooh, he may have wanted to think that through a little bit more before he posted it just that way. And it's cool to hear too that like Brody and the rest of the team not only support what he's doing, are encouraging it. I mean, and I think that's fantastic. I think that sometimes when you have somebody who may upset an apple cart here or there, it's maybe a little bit less of that. But no, it's go be you, Marcus. Seems to be the general feeling of the ball club, and I think that to me is exciting. And I'm not sure past managements may have had the same idea.
Yeah, he reminds me a lot, actually, of Pedro.
Yeah,
Because
that's fair.
when Pedro was here, Wright was considered the leader of the team, but Wright was always a soft-spoken leader. And whenever there was a major incident would happen, and there were more than their fair share when Pedro was here, while reporters would flock to Wright, it seemed like they would always flock to Pedro as well, even on days he wasn't pitching. And Pedro was always right up front in front of the cameras, no problem addressing any issues. And then he would go out on the field and he would back up whatever he said. So I get a lot of Pedro Martinez off of Stroman, and let's face it, it's some really great years with Pedro.
Yeah, we certainly did, and I think that the difference I think is I think just a little bit is that when we got Pedro, we got the tail end of the Hall of Famer.
Right.
The after the first year, kind of you expected a little bit of a fade with a 4-year deal that they gave him, but Marcus Stroman is 29. We got him in the heart of his prime. And like I said, that's part of why I think this is a guy. I mean, if the Mets can only re-sign one guy that's going to be a free agent this year, I want it to be Marcus Stroman. Period.
I as well. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I want Stroman back. And the thing is, and we've said it for a long time, much like Cohen wants the Mets, I feel like Stroman wants the Mets. I
Yes.
felt like he was so happy when he got moved here. I feel like he has immediately embraced the fans. He's embraced the city. He's embraced this team, his teammates. I feel like he genuinely likes being a New York Met. And how many times did we say that carries so much weight when it comes to signing or trading for a guy, whether or not he really wants to be a Met? Ken Griffey Jr. did not want to be a Met.
No, he did not.
Marcus Stroman wants to be a Met.
Exactly. And I think that's kind of, I mean, for me, that's easily the, part of the appeal. I mean, the fact that he's really good. And I mean, clearly, I mean, for those who followed him through the quarantine, his work ethic is amazing. I mean, the guy converted his deck, the dock that goes out to the water, into a pitching mound and was, using it for practice every day. The amount of workout this guy does, the amount of finesse into his game. I mean, we're talking about a guy that I think legitimately in a full season, and that's part of Marcus Stroman is one of the reasons I'm most disappointed we don't have 162 games this year.
Right. I would love to see him over the course of a full season what he would perform at.
I think he's a 15 to 20 game winner. With the right run support. I mean, Jacob deGrom's sitting in the corner listening to that comment going, what's 15 games? Who wins 15 games? Who does that? But obviously, Mets run support in the past, unrelated. I think this is a guy who, in a good year, 15 to 20 wins, somewhere in the 2.5 to 3.25 ERA, and somebody that, at least gives DeGrom a little bit of run for the money when awards are discussed. And I think Stroman at his peak, that's what he is. And that's what I want to see.
Right. Right, and I actually was reading a piece, I believe it's by our friend Mr. Toscano, actually, saying how Stroman's ready to embrace his role as a number two. And I mean, it's again, the guy just gets it. He understands his place on this team. He understands that he is the number two. But like you said, he knows that if he pitches well enough, he could give number one a run for his money. And who's against that?
Well, I mean, 5 years ago when we're in the playoff run, it's still the Jacob DeGrom, the number one. No, Harvey, it's Syndergaard, then DeGrom. Well, you can always leapfrog the other guys. I don't think DeGrom's going anywhere anytime soon, and I think he's well equipped to take his skill set late into his 30s. But you look at Stroman, I think he is too. I think he is built for the long haul, and I have no problem seeing him get a 4 or 5 year contract easily.
Oh yeah,
Like I said, I just hope it's with us.
right. A contract that takes him to his mid 30s, perfectly comfortable with that, and then he probably gets one for a couple of years, even after that, depending on how he performs. But I definitely hope he is a guy who is on this team well beyond this year. And I will point out, JB, that it only took till episode 2 of the reboot for you to bring up the name Matt Harvey.
Well, there you go. Well, I had to taunt a little bit, just like I like to taunt some of my friends online there that told us back in the days of the first show that we're going to see a AAA game. It must have been 2012 now, I guess it was. And this DeGrom kid is pitching. What can you tell me? He ain't nothing. And that day I did the show, wound up doing the show with you from the stands in the stadium in Tacoma. And like, I know our friend said this guy wasn't much. He was just called up because he was on turn, but he's just given up 2 hits over 7 innings and has looked like an ace. I don't know what's going on here. This guy looks good to me, and I'm no scout, so I'm questioning myself, just going, must be a fluke. Then I see him pitch, the next year. I'm like, again in AAA, I'm like, this guy's still really good. What's going on here? So on the way out, I see him in the parking lot, and I get him to sign a ball, and I'm like, I have a feeling this ball is going to be something. And a week later, he was called up, and the rest is history. Called up to be in the bullpen, I might add.
Right. Yeah, I remember you raving about him after that days. You've seen a couple in the minors that you've come back and been like, this guy is definitely underrated. And if there's anyone who's ever underrated, it was Jake indeed.
I think the fact that multiple scouts that looked at him on a weekly basis, throughout the various levels and other teams, the fact that nobody saw this coming. Again, I'm just a fan. I'm no expert. I play one on YouTube apparently, but I'm no expert. And I saw it. I don't know how I saw it, but I saw it. And it's the only time I've ever seen it. I haven't seen it before or since.
Well, I hope we see a lot of it this year because obviously with Noah out, and that's a real bummer. I mean, not like Jake doesn't know that he has to be great, but I think the pressure is really going to be on him this year, especially in this whole shortened season. We've joked a couple times that, we could have a Cy Young winner who has 3 wins under his belt for the season. But I think Jake's going to know that he's going to want to hit the ground running as fast as he can this year and can't kind of get himself into June form because he's not really going to have that April and May to get himself into June form. So he is one guy I'm fully confident that he will get it done, but it's going to be really interesting to see around baseball when it does come award season time off a 60-game season, how that plays out.
And one of the things I'm really encouraged by, Louis earlier this week, when asked about the readiness of his players, had spoken, and I'm sure, obviously DeGrom and Stroman, the two we've just been discussing, come immediately to mind, but that his pitchers all seem pretty ready. He's been very impressed with how they look, how they're pitching. The batters are still swinging a little slow yet and catching up, but the pitchers seem to be well on track, and that for a team that is reliant upon good pitching, that's very encouraging.
Right. Yeah. I saw the press conference with Jake the other day, and he was talking about he stayed on his regular routine, stayed on his regular throwing schedule, and it seems like the entire staff did, which is great to hear. And really, the whole team to a man, it seems like during the shutdown period, it seems like everyone did what they had to do. Everyone put in the work they needed to do. I mean, if you saw today the guns out, suns out, guns out show at City Field, where you got Alonso and Conforto showing off the guns, and they look like they're in the greatest shape that they could possibly be. It seems like all these guys took that shutdown period very seriously, and nobody Pablo Sandoval did on our team.
No, definitely not. I mean, the reality of it is even Cespedes' guns look fully loaded at this point, and that's something that this team needs as well.
Oh yeah, I watched actually a video earlier of him sprinting from home plate to second, and he seemed like he was running no problem, which is really encouraging to me because I feel like there's a lot of guys right now who can be overlooked, and I feel like are kind of being overlooked in spring training. I know the guys over at Mesmerized wrote an article today. Don't overlook JD Davis. He is one of the guys who I think plays a big role on this team. But for me, the most important thing that I think could happen would be if Cespedes can play the field on a regular basis, that allows Dom Smith to DH. And I want Dom Smith getting 4 at-bats every day right now. I think, unfortunately, the injury got him, but he was swinging a great bat. I think you need Dom to be in there at DH as often as possible. I know you want to get JD Davis licks, but let's face it, not superior in the field, and he's a really threatening bat to have looming at the end of that bench in late innings.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, with the Cano being one of the question marks at this point, you do have to wonder a little bit. Are they going to have to juggle things around just a little bit to accommodate things, and Cespedes being able to play the field gives them a whole other option as to how they play the game and how they build that lineup. So certainly, I mean, yeah, I want Dom Smith getting good at bats, and solid at bats. 3 to 4 a game would be preferable, and having Dom and Alonso in the same lineup is just perfect to me. So I mean, I'm all for it. I'm 100% for it. But obviously, a lot of it is going to surround what the Mets do with Cano, and the fact is, there'd been talk prior to obviously anything COVID related, potentially with Cano that when the season came around, going back to the original spring training, that this was a guy that may not play every day anyway.
Right. Yeah, Cano was always a question mark as far as the number of games he was planning on playing and how they would work around that. I mean, obviously, the simple workaround is to move McNeil over there, and then you can play JD Davis at third. Again, not ideal from a defensive standpoint, but I mean, just listen to these names we're saying, man. You're talking Alonso, Conforto, Dom Smith. You've got Yoenis in there. I mean, this is a team that should never struggle to score runs. This team has the potential offensively to be every good as the team was that had Carlos Beltran and Carlos Delgado with David Wright wedged in between them. This has every much that potential offensively to be a team that, for the record books, when it comes to the Mets.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the thing. I think that you have a team that, as strictly speaking, as a fan, would be reasonably disappointed to not see make postseason in this particular scenario. Should we get there? Now, of course, we always have to make that preface that you never know at some point, with spikes and everything going on with COVID, neither one of us are epidemiologists at all. So, we can't predict what's going to happen. But the season could get shut down at any point. But barring that, a full play from opening day to the last day of the World Series, there seems to be, this is a team that should be in it. I mean, absolutely should be in it in a division that, quite frankly, especially when it comes to the DH, is advantageous. As much as I hate the DH, as much as I wanted the DH to never be in the National League, certainly I used to laugh at our friend Maury Brown when he would join us and talk about how the NLDH was coming and there was nothing we could do about it. Unfortunately, he was right. But the reality of it is, even coming into this season, when there had been some discussion this past off season about universal DH, I realized with the roster as currently constructed, it would benefit us more than any other team in the division. And that's exactly how it's come to pass.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's definitely a time that, and we haven't had a lot of this, that whenever the NLDH has come up, we haven't been able to sit there and say, I've got three, potentially four candidates who are ideal for the designated hitter on the roster. And that hasn't always been the case in the past, but it is very beneficial for the Mets this year to have the DH available to them. I just think this team is, the way it's designed, they're going to score a lot of runs. Hopefully they're going to pitch well starting wise, and then it's going to come down to the bullpen. And I think never more than in a 60-game season is the role of the bullpen so important. I mean, a blown save is really going to feel like it has like huge magnitude across standings and things of that nature. So I really think, I'm hoping we're getting guys on track who might not have been on track last year. And I'm really hoping that the bullpen is going to be much improved, because it's going to be vital to this team's success. If this bullpen pitches the way that they have shown that they have the capability of pitching, if everybody pitches up to about 100%, 90% of their A game, this team, there's absolutely no reason they shouldn't win the division. On top of the fact that you have a very advantageous schedule from a geographical standpoint. We're not going to be doing those overnight flights to California. We're not going to be playing those 2 a.m. games. From a physical standpoint, and again, it's as long as we're playing the games, from a physical standpoint, this is going to be advantageous to the Mets and all the teams as well, that we're kind of playing a regional-based schedule.
Yeah, and I look at it too. I mean, that's exactly. I mean, you talk about the pitchers and whatnot. And, the absence of fans this year, the absence of heavy travel. I've seen Edwin Diaz pitch for several years, being up here in the Northwest, being in Oregon. Certainly when he was a member of the Mariners, I saw him pitch on a regular basis. The guy is good. He is not a fluke. I mean, that much is very obvious. Last year was the fluke. Now, certainly you don't lose good stuff. You don't lose that arm. You don't lose that control. But stuff, obviously can get in your head a little bit. I got to think, I mean, with no crowds and less travel and less distraction, this is a good scenario, psychologically speaking, for Edwin to get his head on straight and turn the rest of his Mets career into productive outs.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I don't think the problem last year was physical with him. I definitely think that New York got to him, and we've seen it happen to tons of players before. I just think once the Boo Bird started on him, I think that really got in his head, and I don't think he was ever able to pull himself out. So you're right. Pitching in front of an empty stadium could be very advantageous to him. Who knows what a closing scenario is going to feel like without fans in the building? Is it going to feel like pitching live PP, or is that tension and excitement of a big game save going to still be there? We'll have to see, but I definitely think that this is so many things are setting up right now in the Mets' favor that it would be hard to see them come out here and throw up a 30-30 record.
One of the things too, it's been so long since last season. I mean, certainly one of the things that didn't serve Edwin Diaz well, and many pitchers weren't, was the baseball. And Lord only knows what baseball is coming out there at this point. Is this a ball that's going to fly out of empty stadiums, or is this a ball that is going to stay in a little bit more? And it'll be very interesting to see how pitchers adapt back to a different ball if they have in fact, quote unquote, unjuiced it. But I'm certainly going to be very interested to know what the stadium atmosphere is going to be like. And I think it's something we'll have to ask our guest next week about. Joining us next week is scheduled to be Colin Cosell, one of the PA voices at Citi Field. And, the fact is, I know they're going to keep things as normal as possible over there. So I'm very curious to see what kind of energy level and are they going to amp it up, or what are they planning on doing? So, some of the game day operations he might have some insight into.
Yeah, we would hope that he'll let us know what to expect from an in-game perspective. I guess we'll get a little taste of that as well with the 2 exhibition games that we have scheduled. We'll see what the new normal is. We know there's going to be cutouts in the stands of the fans. If you pay a certain dollar amount, they're going to put a cardboard cutout of you in the stadium, which we saw Korean baseball do. And think I saw it was the Brewers who actually they took it a step further that if your cardboard cutout gets hit with a foul ball or a home run, they're actually going to mail it to you, which is pretty awesome of them. But yeah, it's going to be a totally unique and different experience. I mean, just watching the beat guys, they're sending out their tweets, their pictures, and they're up in the press box, and it's like, guys, did someone invest in like a zoom lens? Because it all feels like I'm back in Shea and I'm in the upper decks, section 2 behind home plate in that first row. They're so far away, but yeah, everything's different this year. We'll see how it plays out. I've been actually, I don't know about you, I have been loving the post workout press conferences that are being done via video call, because typically you don't really hear the reporter's question in the press conferences, and now you're hearing the reporter's question. You're getting the response from Louis, and I've actually been enjoying the press conferences.
Yeah, I mean that's you're able to hear everybody is not well, actually when I was at bat, or anything like that. I mean, you see who's talking, you get an idea who's asking the question, and you kind of you get to see everything play out and hear it, which is nice, because half the time I'm really struggling, and sometimes, like any of us, we play with the volume to try and jack up the volume to hear the question being asked of the player, and then the player starts answering and blows our ears out. So this is much better than that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually shaping my opinion of some beat guys based on the quality of their questions. Not to be judgmental, it's a tough job, I get it, but I mean, no one's impressed me more than our guest tonight, because he asked a couple questions the other day, and I myself was saying, I wish someone would ask that, and he did. So I mean, it's been a pretty good experience from a fan at home perspective. It's been a lot easier to follow along.
Yeah, absolutely, and we're excited to have Justin Toscano with us. You're, of course, watching the Happy Recap radio show, and we're certainly glad to have with our guest today, Justin Toscano, who's in his second year of covering the Mets for NorthJersey.com and the USA Network. He's a San Diego, California native and graduated from Arizona State. You can find him on Twitter at Justin C. Toscano. And Justin, I'm super excited to have you with us, super glad to have you with us. And, this should have been your first quote unquote full year on the beat, but not quite working out that way.
Oh man, I know. Yeah, spring training. Like I joined middle of May last year, so yeah, this was like my first full spring training on the beat. Everything, it was going smoothly, and then boom, March hits, and one night I'm at Chick-fil-A and Rudy Gobert tests positive for coronavirus, and then the next day MLB's shut down, and yeah, now we find ourselves in this like weird 60 game sprint thing that we don't even know is gonna happen for sure. So yeah, it's God, yeah, it's been a weird year.
Well, obviously, you guys doing this whole summer camp thing right now and covering it has been, I'm sure, had its own share of difficulties in
Yeah.
being completely outside the norm of what you're used to. You
Yeah.
could just talk a little bit about like how your life is different covering this year as opposed to pre-COVID.
Sure, yeah. Well, obviously, like pre-COVID, I think a lot of baseball reporters, especially, just love and are very grateful for the normally like great access we do have. A lot of clubhouse time, 50 minutes a day, about an hour a day. Then you get the manager after, which is pretty good, and especially because you've got some stars in baseball, but it's not the same way it is in basketball or football, where you've got these guys who are their own brand. So LeBron James doesn't like to talk before the game, or Saquon Barkley might only talk once a week to everybody. See, baseball players are pretty approachable. So that was, for me, like that's been probably the toughest part, is that now you're just sitting on these Zooms with everybody else. Whereas like my thing is I like to give fans a look at like who they're rooting for. I like to do like creative ideas. Like I like to, and I mean, I've still got a few of those tricks up my sleeve that like I'll use, but it's like, man, it is tougher because you're kind of at the mercy of whoever the public relations staff is going to get for you. And that's not the Mets' fault or anything. They've been, as good as they've tried really hard through this. But yeah, it's different because you're confined to the press box. You get there and they're doing these workouts, and you're just told, okay, it's Luis Rojas at noon, these guys at 1:15, 1:30, and that's kind of it. So it's like, it's harder, I would say, I find myself writing more on a player because it's harder to get a full story. Because if you were to execute, it would take you much longer to execute a creative idea because you're only getting a couple of these players a day, essentially. So it's like, it's harder that way because you can't work on your own time and accomplish this stuff in the clubhouse. So I think that's been the toughest part. And I've used my binoculars. I mean, it's like when I was in college, I got some binoculars because so many times at these football practices, it would be so tough to like track who was there, who was on Muscle Beach. And then I hadn't used them, but now I'm actually using them. And that's what it does feel like as a college football beat now. It feels like, because we're not getting any of the COVID information. The Mets don't want to release any of, that personal information not related to baseball, which is understandable. But yeah, it's just like you're tracking everybody, looking through the binoculars to see who's there, who's not, who's participating, who's in the field. It's just yeah, it's been way different. And obviously like the biggest difference being not knowing whether it's actually going to start or not.
Well, one of the things we were talking about, in fact, in the times when we've had beat reporters on in the past on the show, and even talking about it before this interview, a lot of times we would ask the beat reporters, "So, what are you hearing about? What are you, what's the scuttlebutt? What's the down low? How do you even determine a down low at this point? There doesn't seem to be one available to you."
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're not really talking to anybody in the clubhouse. Obviously you report things or confirm things as needed, but it's like right now the stories, it's almost weird because it's like there's not a lot of that, like what I'm hearing, because the stories are right in front of your eyes almost. And I mean, if they don't, I mean, you're not going to know. There's one lane right now, and that's like each day's workout. Okay, now they're going to have like 2 exhibition games this weekend. So it's like, it is way different because it's not like you're talking to players, even, off the record, not doing stories or anything like that. And yeah, it's a weird time for sure. It's kind of, you're just at the mercy of the workout and you cover that. And it's very, 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 I guess one lane is the best way I would describe it.
What's funny is when the quarantine started, I mean, it became the routine in our house was every day we would break what we were doing at 11 o'clock for Governor Cuomo's update. Then at 1:30 we would break again for
Yeah.
Governor Murphy's update. And while we're still following those along, now I find myself having these same set breaks for, oh, this is what time Louis is going to be on. Oh, good, they got Jake today on a Zoom call. Let's check that out. And it becomes sort of my routine now that I look forward to. My break from everything COVID related is getting back to a little sense of normalcy with baseball. And I've enjoyed the Zoom interviews with those guys because typically we don't hear your voice. Typically it's the murmur of the background noise. We're actually getting to hear both sides of a conversation, which has been pretty cool from our perspective.
Yeah. That's that was probably one thing that I was thinking about actually, like literally right before you mentioned not hearing, our voice regularly, is that, yeah, I know that they've always live streamed them, but it's like Rojas could just start talking about some random, you wouldn't even know if you didn't hear the question. So it is nice. It's nice that they do it for the fans, especially. And I think like that, just what you mentioned is one bigger thing. It's like, I know COVID still exists, but you'd be lying to say that baseball and then done successfully, wouldn't at least bring normalcy and happiness to people if, you're keeping everybody safe and whatnot. And that's been the good thing, is I feel like people, I don't really complain about the different protocols and things like that. Cause one, I'm just grateful to have a job, but two, I think like if they can do this right, I know that even with just these workouts and the Zoom interviews, there are a lot of people that really look forward to it. And, it just plays such a big role in our country. And I know like there are bigger issues, and it's okay to state that there are bigger issues, but you can't really deny that so many people have looked forward to sports. And now it's like, for people who have had a rough few months, it's like those interviews might be the thing getting them through. Is like, as cheesy as that sounds, it's like, yeah, you take breaks in your day for that. It's like, it's just something different to think about.
Well, talk about that for a second. As you mentioned protocols and whatnot, and we know what the players are going through. We also know where MLB is trying to keep up with. For someone on the beat that's covering them day after day, what are your protocols? What do you have to go through to get in the door that day, etc.?
Yeah, so it's I think I think I'm not on a PR staff. I think the limit of credentials is 35. So they can only credential, each team can only credential 35 people total. That's, print, digital, broadcast, radio, photo, video. So 35 total. So that's going to be maybe more of an issue during the regular season. But so we get these BBWAA cards, Baseball Writers Association of America, that are good at any ballpark and any spring training facility in a normal year. So we got those, used them in spring training. They're not valid now because these teams only have a limited number of credentials. So you have to apply for a credential. Your, editor, whoever, has to apply for a credential every single day. And so once you're approved for that, the day before you find out that you're approved for that, for the next day, you show up the next day. The way the Mets do it is there are usually two windows you can enter the ballpark. If the first workout's at like 9:15, the first window is going to be 9 to 10:30 or something. And then for the second workout, it'll be, 4 to 5 or whatever. So once you're there, it's kind of business as usual, but they do a temperature check after questioning you, reading these COVID symptoms and kind of, have you had this? They just read off the symptoms and are like, stop me if you had any of them in the last 2 weeks. I've done it like a week now. I forgot the questions. If anybody you live with has experienced those symptoms, if you've been in contact with anybody who's tested positive, or if you've been in contact with anybody who is now self-isolating. So you have to go through all of that before you can even get in the door for that temperature check. And then you pick up your credential. And it's kind of weird. There's basically just one way in and out of the ballpark, and you're only allowed in the press box. I mean, they have waters there, but you've got to bring your own food, which, like, I was telling somebody the other day that I haven't made a lunch for myself since probably high school. Like, this is like, it's like now I'm finding, when 5, 6, 7 p.m. hits, I'm like, good God, what am I going to bring for lunch tomorrow? Because it feels like I haven't made this many lunches in years. And so, yeah, you've got to bring your own food. You're only in the press box, can't roam the ballpark, which is a bummer because I'm a big ballpark roamer. But yeah, that's basically the protocol is, and obviously, socially distanced press box, and then Mets PR gives out magnets for the bathroom. So only one person at a time allowed in the bathroom, and you're supposed to put your magnet on the door. So yeah, just a bunch of things. It doesn't even come close to what the players are having to deal with. But it is a different life. But again, it's good to be busy and not just my 2 p.m. walk being the highlight of my day.
Well, I guess today we have a whole new opportunity and also probably new challenges for you guys as the secondary camp is opening in Brooklyn. How do you think the logistics of that are going to go for you and determine where you're going every day?
Yeah, so because I live in the city, like, I don't need a car. But if you were to go to Brooklyn, obviously it's pretty far out there. So it'd take you a while to get out there public transportation wise. So I want to say it stinks that they closed MCU Park to the public and the media, but it kind of doesn't, because it would be, I'd have to just take a bunch of Ubers and stuff if we did have to go out there, and you'd have to pick between the two. But I think it's easier that way, and you're not allowed in anyways. So the main guys are still going to be at Citi Field. But it is, I would still I'm still going to want updates on the guys over at MCU Park. And it's really hard in professional sports and college sports to get updates on things you're not seeing, because the team knows that you're not seeing them. So basically you're at the mercy of whatever information they want to get out. Because it's just the excess are going to be at that alternate site, I'm guessing. So logistically, it does work out well for the Mets, because some teams are having to do it, in another state or in a place that isn't as close. So at least they have Brooklyn, it's close, whatever. But for my purposes, we're not allowed in anyways, but it is still tough. You think about like how much information they are going to give us if they know that we're not seeing it with our own eyes. Like if, I haven't seen Robinson Cano in a week, that's I can, you can ask that, and it's harder for them to lie about something when you've seen it with your own eyes. But it's a bit different asking for information when they know that you haven't seen it anyways.
when you have a player like Cano and a couple others, I mean, how do you approach that from a writing standpoint? Because I mean, at least with Cano, it kind of nudge nudge, wink wink, can't say anything, but everybody kind of gets the impression they know what's going on. I mean,
Yeah.
how do you dance with that one?
Yeah. You mean in like stories and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just like for me, I don't speculate. Like I know some people might add a little extra context, but if it's for a situation like that, I'm just gonna say he hasn't been in camp since Monday. Team said, they're not gonna say anything. Here's Brody's quote on, blah blah blah. We're happy to discuss baseball related matters, but nothing no personal medical issues or anything like that. So I'm just gonna say that because those are like the facts and that's what people need to know. So I think that one's almost like a ticking time bomb. If you want to add, if you want to sensationalize it or add context, I mean, you're pretty like, I don't do that because it's just kind of, I mean, I don't know what's going on with him, for all I know, it could be a serious family issue unrelated to him or something like that. So it's, you almost, how do you dance with it? You don't want to dance with it. You just state the facts like boom, 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 for me at least. And then, cause I'm not going to speculate. I feel like when it's somebody could be a personal issue like that, it's almost wrong to do anything other than state the facts. And that's just my opinion because I mean, I know like these guys are humans too. And if I were in that position, I wouldn't want people even speculating. Like it's always kind of like your journalism professors will tell you like state the facts and then let the readers form their own opinions. So I think that's the perfect example of that. Like there are some stories where you can maybe lead the reader to what conclusions you're coming to through some context, but that is not one of them. Like for that one, I'm just going to say I haven't seen Robinson Cano for a week, however long it is since this day. The Mets confirmed he hasn't been in camp, or they confirmed Brad Brock hasn't been there. Jared Hughes hasn't reported yet, that sort of thing. And then say what they say. Anything else is, I think, a little bit kind of weird.
Let's talk a little bit between the lines. Well,
Yeah.
we're hoping to see a lot more of this year.
Yeah.
One guy I get the sense when I'm looking at your Twitter timeline, one guy I think that you're pretty excited to be covering is Yoenis Cespedes. He's obviously, it's a contract year for Yo, so we always love to see what Yo does in contract years. You've been seeing him, well, not really from up close, from the press box. What have you thought so far of Yoenis, his performance, and most importantly, running and fielding right now?
Yeah. I think the Mets officials kind of evaluation of him being that the bat is there, the defense, the base running is getting there, the defense is further behind the base running. I think that's accurate. We haven't seen him in the field much. He has played a little bit of a sim game in the field, but he's done like defensive work in drills and he's looked fine. I mean, he was never a great defensive outfielder to begin with. You have him out there for his bat. I think explosiveness in terms of like his bat and his lower half, like he's probably there. Like you can tell the dude did his work to strengthen his legs and rehabbed. And like, I totally believe him when he says he got up at 5 a.m. every morning for like the last year, and did all that stuff because it does, he does look a lot better and he's running better. It's just the question is, it's hard to tell because these are only base running drills. It's a controlled environment. He doesn't run the bases in sim games or inter squad. So it's hard to tell whether he can run the bases at the workload level necessary to play every day. But I think like the bat, I think that's there. Like with the DH, I think if the Mets if they feel comfortable with his running, I think you'll see him, DHing to start the year. At least some, whether he splits it with that, I don't know how the split's going to be, but his bat is ready to go. And I don't think it's ambitious for him to say that he'll be ready to go for opening day because he's doing everything. He's sprinting across the outfield, in fielding drills, running balls down to the wall and chucking it to the relay guy or to second or whatever. So he's doing everything. But obviously his base running and his defense are further behind the bat timing wise and classic Cespedes, like the bat is still there. I mean, you look at he hit a homer off of Lugo last week, and then God, this was a couple days ago that yesterday that he hit like a rocket, off of Lugo again. So I mean, his bat is there, and even going back to spring training, the bat was good in live BPs and sim games. Like he had home runs and hits here and there, and then of course his regular batting practice is always like a show. So I honestly think that he'll be ready for opening day in a DH role. I'm just not sure what his extent of contribution will be defensively, especially because they have JD Davis, so they have Dominic Smith. And now that they have the DH, they have a way, for this season, his contract year, they've got a way to help Cespedes contribute without having to play the field.
Speaking of the DH, obviously DH in the first time for the National League, and as I think most fans that have accepted this, I don't expect it to ever go back. I think it's here to stay. But as far as the division goes, since the division is what we're playing this year, do the Mets seem to be the team best built to accommodate a DH with their current roster? Because it seems like they have a world of options that exceed what the other teams have to offer right now.
Yeah, I honestly think if you went down the depth chart for a lot of these teams, I mean, some of them, they'll put a DH in there, but it's like, is the DH just a bench bat, or is it, that's kind of the barometer. Is like, are you going to throw just a bench bat in there because you've got to put a DH in there? Is there somebody suited for it? And I think what you're talking about is that there's somebody suited for it, with the Mets. I mean, they've got so many different options. Before all of this happened, you wondered, like, okay, if Yoenis Cespedes is healthy, how's the left field split going to be? What happens to Dom Smith? I mean, he's obviously a huge trade chip if he's not, he's blocked at first, obviously, and if he's blocked in the outfield. But now you can just say, okay, well, Cespedes DHing. They've got like JD Davis if he needs to DH, but he can also play third, and Jeff McNeil can move around, meaning that like if they needed, McNeil in the outfield, Conforto could DH one day. They're going to be able to get a lot of guys off of their legs because they do have options between Cespedes, Davis, and Dominic Smith. I mean, you've got good bats there, and even like Melky Cabrera, if he makes the roster, I mean, you've got respectable bats there where you're going. I mean, if you're looking at it's almost lucky for the Mets that they ended up with this situation that there's a DH this year, because they were going to have to confront these roster issues in terms of playing time between Cespedes, Davis, Smith, and even like guys in the infield. That's like, they seem to be encouraged about Lowry's bat too. So if he ever gets up to speed, I guess you could see him, DHing. They do have a plethora of options, and it seems like in terms of the DH, it fell into their lap because they're just they're best suited for it among, they're probably in the top tier of teams suited for it in the league, but it fell into the lap because none of this was expected. So it's kind of a nice little surprise from the 60-game sprint.
Well, as a Mets fan, I'm just going off the impression that Robinson Cano will not be here for opening day, or will not be ready for opening day, because that's just my life as a Mets fan.
Yeah.
But I think that helps eliminate one problem in a way, because I think at that point, you shift McNeil over, JD gets his at-bats at third. You'll have Cespedes at the DH, and it gives you, I mean, it's a great problem to have, but it does give you the problem of how you getting Dominic Smith, who deserves 3 to 4 bats per game. How are you getting him the reps?
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't know. And obviously sometimes these things work themselves out, unfortunately, like with injuries and such. So it's like a good problem to have, like you mentioned, but I don't know. It's kind of terrible too, because you hate to see someone and think like, okay, he's probably a future trade chip, but it's like, if they can't, he could start at first base on a decent amount of other teams in this league. So it's tough because he does have a good bat. He did show last year in a part-time role, which is very hard to not know when you're getting your next at bat and whatnot, that he was a big league hitter and he was, fit for it. So it's like, I think the Cano thing you mentioned, if that does become reality, yeah, you shift Davis over to third, Smith is in left, Cespedes DH, easy there. And who knows what happens, but I think that's going to be it. And with the DH now, though, you could see, I mean, God, 60 games. I mean, Pete Alonso is going to want to play every single game. That's just Pete Alonso. But I mean, if you wanted to get him, if they needed to get him off his legs a little bit and get him a little breather, they could always throw him in the DH and Smith at first, just because that DH gives you so much flexibility in terms of being able to solve that playing time issue, where you can still have guys as bat in the lineup while getting some other guys some run. But the Dominic Smith, I don't want to call it a conundrum because it's not a huge problem. It's just like, it's confusing. Like, I don't know where they'll go with that, because he's always, if you just draw out the roster and the depth chart and just some lineups, I mean, he's always, I don't want to say the odd man out. It's just like, you always wonder, how is this guy going to get enough run to keep developing? I mean, he's a great young player, and he's going to be, I believe he's going to be a regular in the league for a long time. But yeah, it's tough because he could start on other teams, and then right now he's almost like buried if you if you want to, especially because left field is in his natural position, blocked at first. So yeah, I mean, but I think the situation you mentioned is probably his best route to regular at bats. But I mean, the DH too, and as much as I hate to say it, like, injuries always, take care of these things, unfortunately. So it's a good problem to have, and I do believe he's going to get his at bats this season.
So turning to the other side of the diamond, with coming into spring training, we had the original spring training. That is, we had the perceived battle of Rick Porcello versus Michael Wacha for that final rotation slot. That problem solves itself with Noah Syndergaard going down, and normally that would be a tremendous problem for an 162 game season. Thankfully, if there ever was a good time for a player to get a Tommy John surgery, Noah seemed to have found it. But it requires everybody stepping up, obviously, with Noah out for this sprint. Talk a little bit about Marcus Stroman. You had an article on NorthJersey.com about him on Sunday, and I highly recommend reading it. Talk a little bit about his, not only the team's expectations, but his expectations for himself, because we talked about him earlier on the show, and he's a guy that we're very, very high on and think that he could be part of the long-term solution for this team.
Yeah, I'm high on him too. I think that sometimes fans have certain expectations, and it's not wrong, because look, the guy was an ace in Toronto. He was Toronto's ace. But, coming over, who's like Jacob deGrom, or who has the power stuff of Noah Syndergaard? So it's like, those are tough comparisons. I mean, and plus, I think Marcus Stroman, he got off to a little bit of an underwhelming start last year with the Mets after the trade, but I don't think we take into account enough how difficult trades are for these players. I mean, you've got to like uproot, and his first time doing so, he'd been in Toronto his whole career. So that's what he attributed last year's struggles to. But I think this year he thinks he's going to be elite, and I think he will really step up. I think he's ready. I mean, it seems like he's had that time to settle into New York, and obviously, God, it's tough to tell what he's actually thinking based on his Twitter, because he's just always positive, and he's always positive on social media, and that's a good thing. But I really do think he is going to step up, but he needs to. In a 60-game season, every pitch, every out is that much more important, and starting pitching, which is already, you could argue the most important part of baseball, of a team, is going to become that much more important. And now, the Mets were lining up to have DeGrom, Syndergaard, Stroman, but now it's DeGrom, Stroman, and then, Matt's Porcello, Wacha. I know that, Stroman was complimentary of the depth on the team, but it's really going to have to be on his shoulders, because the Mets cannot have Jacob deGrom and 4 okay starters. I mean, that's not gonna win you anything in a sprint like this. And so I think in a wacky year, the best way to take control of the league kind of and kind of like take the reins on this thing is to have good starting pitching. And I think, Marcus Stroman, God, I mean, if you were to look down the Mets roster, he's probably in your top 5 most critical players for this year, like maybe top 3, because I mean, he's going to need to if he doesn't step up, I don't think they have a chance of actually contending, because I mean, you can't have Jacob deGrom and the 4 others. You've got to have, in this league, especially these days, you've got to have at least 2 great starters. And I do think he's back, to maybe his elite form. He certainly feels like it. He's obviously, of course, he's always in great shape. I mean, he trains so hard. But he did talk a little bit yesterday about having his 4-seamer back, that he didn't, from 2014, he threw it a lot. It's got plus rise, but he didn't really throw it last year. And I think, now having some time to figure that stuff out, I think he's ready for a big year. And I have a hunch he'll have it. But it's always tough because I know Mets fans are just so used to great starting pitching, but not everybody has got the lights out stuff like Syndergaard, or just not everybody's a Jacob deGrom.
It's funny. We were talking a little earlier on the show about Stroman specifically, and the one thing that I've said is I think the down the field's definitely going to be there. But the one thing that I've really picked up a vibe about him this spring and summer camp is I've been picking up a very leadership kind of vibe out of him, where he is going to be one of those veteran voices in the clubhouse that younger guys can look up to, and where you guys are looking for a quote after a game. It very is reminiscent to me of when Pedro Martinez was on this team, where when Pedro wouldn't be pitching on a day, but then for some reason he's the first guy who the reporters would run to for a quote when something would happen in game. And I was definitely kind of picking up that vibe from Stroh this offseason.
And Marcus Stroman, that guy, he could manufacture a bookstore of quotes, man. I mean, he's like and I commend him. I know a lot of people make fun of him for his Twitter and how much he uses it and just the things he says, but the guy likes to keep a positive mindset. And I do agree with you. I think his teammates really take to him, and that's because, especially in this day and age, but in professional sports in general, you've got so many people saying things about you. And up until 10 years ago, you could never actually hear them other than TV, the radio, and the newspaper. Now you've got social media, and you've got things coming at you every which way. Even if you're a role player who made a mistake, you're going to hear it about it on social media. You've got, and Marcus Stroman is kind of that voice for the Mets that is like, I don't care. Like, for lack of a better word, screw this. Like, these people shouldn't, they don't have a right to have these opinions. They don't, they shouldn't be doing this. They shouldn't be doing that. Like, just keep your eye on the prize. And it sounds cheesy, but I do think that people rally around that. He is one of those veteran voices because without Syndergaard, who doesn't seem like he's very vocal, in general, but you've got DeGrom, who is more of a quiet guy, but you've got Stroman, who is one of those veteran voices, and that really helps because a lot of the position players, you've got a young position player core. So to have a guy like Stroman who's not old but is still a veteran voice, I think it really resonates, especially because his message that he's telling those, don't care about anything that's said on the outside, let's just do us. And that, I think it helps. And it was going back to the last question too, that you guys asked about like his long-term prospects in New York. And I think that's something that you look at maybe like, okay, if this guy's going to be a voice for us in the future, we might want to invest in him, in this free agency, especially if you have, because you have a lot of money coming off the books and other forms. So, if you want, look, like Mets fans last year clamored about, replacing Zach Wheeler, a fifth starter. Well, if Marcus Stroman leaves in free agency, that's a much tougher guy to replace than a Zach Wheeler, I think, in terms of just natural talent and that voice. So I think they will seriously look at that when it comes time to decide the future, because you are right. I think a veteran voice like that, especially in a year like this, I don't think he gets enough credit for that voice. His teammates really seem to take to him too, because he is very screw it. Like, he just doesn't care what people think, or he doesn't seem to, which is that's kind of how you need to be, I feel like.
So if every Mets season was a movie, there's always a subplot, an off the field subplot. This year would appear to be the sale of the team. Now, in talking about somebody like Marcus Stroman, we know the financial situation the Wilpons have been through over the last decade. We know that this season has certainly, or lack thereof, has not helped that and has exacerbated those financial issues. Talk a little bit about the potential sale of this team and what that will mean potentially to free agency. Is Stroman a guy that we could lose because of ownership transition?
Yeah. I don't know if you can lose him because of ownership transition, but I think you can gain him if there's ownership transition. I think if if there is an ownership change and the new owner has those funds, like I know Mets fans are excited because you hear about like Steve Cohen and whatnot, and he is very rich, but it's like, first you got to get an owner in, And then you have to make sure that that owner is going to pour his funds into the team. And that's not always, we've seen in professional sports, that's not always a guarantee. So if there is an ownership change, that could help the prospects of people like, a guy like Stroman or like JT Realmuto, who has failed to sign, a contract extension with the Phillies to this point, because you're going to get that extra flow of cash. And it's almost like, it's funny because I know Brody had that Cano Diaz trade, but everybody's clamoring, oh, improve the bullpen, do this, do that. And it's like, it's tough because at the end of the day, he's not the one putting his money into the team. He's got to get that signed off with ownership from above. And, it's coming from above how much money he can spend. And so if there is a new owner, the GM, if it isn't Brody or, Brody, if he is still GM, I mean, they should have more to spend, and that is going to affect free agency. And I think that's why Mets fans are obviously so excited, and like they should be. I mean, I would preach caution because, it's not a guarantee, but I think like you said, everybody knows the Wilpons' financial state, and they're known as being, cheapies come the winter. So I think like Mets fans are just really on the edge of their seats, hoping for a winter where they finally go after the top free agents. And I think you could legitimately see that if there is an ownership change, because, these people who want the team, part of them wanting the team, wanting the Mets is because it's New York. And like they know, New York is New York for a reason, and free agents are going to be drawn there because usually in a sport like baseball with no salary cap, a New York team should be able to offer the most money. And I think that's the exciting thing about an ownership change for fans. And I think that's the likely thing is that the Mets might get back to acting like a big market team.
As a reporter, will you admit that you're secretly rooting for the J-Rod group to win out, because that would just be so much entertainment to have side stories written about?
That man, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, apparently, like I saw on ESPN right before this that they have apparently some NFL stars that joined their group, which is, I don't know, man. I can't keep track now. It's like A-Rod, J-Lo, the Vitamin Water co-founder Mike Repole, and then Vinny Viola of the Florida Panthers, and now they've got a bunch of NFL stars. I mean, it seems like they really, really want this thing, and I think I don't know if I'm like rooting for them because I don't know what the new owners, what new ownership's going to mean in general for the team, but it's like like if you're a Mets fan, I know everybody wants Steve Cohen because he's the richest of them all, and that's not, a bad feeling to have. But I was just saying, like, A-Rod, he knows baseball. I mean, I don't think A-Rod would settle for being this owner who's just an owner but loses all the time. I think that would honestly kill him because he was a former athlete and he wants to win. So I think, like, look, I think Mets fans are set up well, man. Like, I think the way it's looking right now, it looks, like you might have some good news, and it looks like the people like Steve Cohen being a lifelong Mets fan, A-Rod, actually caring about the team. Like, I think you're going to get somebody in there who really can do something about this.
So basically what you're saying is A-Rod doesn't want to be Jeter.
I think I don't see him like that. And it's weird that it's weird that he's like that. And is so like nonchalant about the process, that it's going to take. And I know that like rebuilding's a thing that you have to go through, especially with new ownership, especially in Miami. That's not a baseball hub, market like New York, or, I mean, I guess it could be, but is not right now. But I don't think A-Rod is like that. No, I think it's very good news for Mets fans that A-Rod and J-Lo, who are only worth, I think, like an estimated $750 million, according to Forbes, are actually putting together this large ownership group and really going hard after this thing to catch Steve Cohen's bid, because it shows. I mean, shows they really want the team. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is that like I can't see A-Rod being that nonchalant of like a loser, putting a loser on the field every single year.
Well, Justin, man, it has been great having you with us. Certainly appreciate your insight, appreciate your writing. It is top notch, northjersey.com. And as I tell people, 99 cents a month, and it is totally worth it just for your writing alone, man. It is great. It's so awesome to have somebody on the beat who's interested in telling the story, not just the reporting. And I just appreciate all the work you've done since joining the beat. And so glad to have had you with us here today.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate those that like made my day. I didn't know you were going to pull that one out, but thank you. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you guys having me on. I'm honored. Thank you.
Would love to have you back sometime.
Of course. Yeah. Anytime. I'm always down to talk Mets baseball.
Absolutely. Thank you much, Justin Toscano.
Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, guys.
EJ, as we wrap up real quick, next week we've got Colin Cosell joining us, and of course Colin Cosell, who along with Marisol Castro is one of the voices of Citi Field, he'll join us to talk about the 2020 without a crowd. He'll also talk about his off-season recording call-ups for fans and turning that adventure into a website that gives back to people in the time of COVID, and immensely fun nowondeck.com. So that'll be next week. And yeah, I absolutely genuine with those compliments of Justin. Since the days of Mark Craig and Justin Diamond, both of who, or Jared Diamond, I should say, Justin's his brother, oddly enough. Jared Diamond, both amazing Met beat reporters when we were first doing this show. And since then, there have been some good ones, but nothing has come along that's been that good. And Justin's got that shot. He is there. He is, and easily my favorite to read.
Yeah, he does really, really good. Like you said, not just reporting, but storytelling. And he's a great guy to have on the show. I hope we get him back a couple more times during the season.
We'll do our best. Well, EJ, any final thoughts?
Joey would kill me if I didn't say to the audience, hey, guys, hammer that subscribe button. And we will definitely be back with more things to check us out.
Sweet. Until next week, let's go Mets.